Hi everyone. In this video I'm going to go over the basics of creating visuals in Excel from pivot tables. We're going to use the data that we've been working with, this air quality data, and I'm going to run through what we were going to do as our in-class assignment. So I do want you to do this, but just follow along and then submit when you're done. So first question here is, which would be a better chart type to visualize the average daily AQI in all Texas counties, a column bar chart or a pie chart, and why? So first of all, let's create both of those visuals. So in order to do this, I'm going to need to calculate the average daily AQI for each county in Texas. And we've already done this, but just as a reminder, I'm going to create the pivot table. So I'll select all of the data here. I do that by clicking in the little box in the top left corner. I'll go to Insert and, the Insert tab and select Pivot Table. I'll click OK. And now to create the pivot table, I'm going to find the county variable right here, and I'll drag it down to the rows box. And then I'm going to get the daily AQI value, drag it, in the values box. So now I can see the sum of all the daily AQIs, but I think this question is asking for the average daily AQI. So I need to change the calculation of the value here. So instead of the sum of these AQIs, I'm going to click the little icon next to that, and I'm going to change this to average. So now this gives me the average AQI for each of the counties in Texas, and I still think this is so cool. This is too many decimal points, like it's too precise a number, but I'm going to leave it there for now and just demonstrate kind of why we might want to change that. So the question is asking, do I want to visualize this as a column chart or a pie chart? So let's look at both of these. Now to create a visual from a pivot table, I'm going to have my cursor or have a cell in the pivot table selected, and I'll go up to this new tab that appears in Excel called Pivot Table Analyze. And if I do this, one of my options is to create a pivot chart. Now by default, this is going to give me a column bar chart, which is one of the ones that I'm asking about. So we can see that this shows that, you know, the average AQI in Bexar County is somewhere between 35 and 40. It's about 37, which if I come over to the table, I can see that it's 37.36 about. So this is one way to visualize, and this works well. But if I want to try a different kind, I can select the visual, and then I get another option here where I can so I get the Design tab, and I can change the chart type. So I can choose any one of Excel's many different chart types here. And the question that I'm asking for our assignment is whether a pie chart would work for this. So let's change it to a simple pie chart. And this is what it would look like. So I have each little slice of the pie with a different color is represented here, and this is what the average would be. So your task after creating the column bar chart and the pie chart is to determine which one of these better visualizes the data. And well, that's all I'll say for that. I do think there's a clear winner here. If I change this back to our column bar chart, this is what it looks like. So I want you to just think about, for a reader, which one's going to give the information in a way that's easier for them to understand. Okay, second question. What is one way you can rearrange the order that data is presented in a visualization? So let's say I like the column bar chart here, but I want to see, like, you know, all of these ordered maybe from like highest average to lowest average. How can we do that? Well, in the pivot table, we can reorder the data in the table itself, and then once we do that, the order that's shown in the visual, in this case in our bar chart, will follow suit. So in order to change the order, like to sort basically data in a pivot table, I can click the little down arrow next to the row labels cell, And notice that right now it's sorting by county. So this is giving me an alphabetical list of all the counties in Texas. If I change this to average of daily AQI value, in other words, now the data that's in the second column of the table, I can choose to either sort this in an ascending way or a descending way. So if I want the county with the highest average AQI to be the first thing I see, then I can select descending. And notice that when I do that, now Harrison County, which is where Houston is, it has the highest AQI value, so the worst air in Texas, all the way down to Lubbock County, which has the best air in Texas. So if we select descending and then I close this, automatically the data in the table is sorted. And this might be a really nice way for readers to get this information, right? So we can see from greatest to least really easily. Now, just for the sake of demonstrating, I still have this weird little thing called blank. That's because when I created the pivot table, I selected everything, including all of these blank cells at the bottom of the table. Like I selected everything in this table to create the pivot table. So we can get rid of that if we just go back to our little drop down and then find the blank field and filter it out. So I'll uncheck blank, and now that goes away from the table and it goes away from our visual. We just don't need to know anything about the blank cells. So there you go. That's question 2. That shows you one way that you can rearrange the order. So you'll just write a little description in your own words about how you can do that. Now the last question here asks, how can you add data labels to a visualization that you create? So data labels are nice sometimes because they give readers a more precise way to interpret a visual. So in this case, I can see visually that the average AQI in Harrison County is probably, well, it pops up for me. It's around 43, right? It's between 40 and 45. But what if I want my readers to be able to know exactly what that number is? Well, I can just add some data labels to this table. So I'm going to select the table. I'll go over to, I believe it is, yeah, it's in the Design tab that pops up. And over to the left, we have Add Chart Element. If I click here, I can add data labels, and I can choose where they go. So right now, none is selected. That's why I don't see any labels on here. But I can have them put right in the center of each bar. I don't think that's a good idea. That's going to be not readable. I can do inside end, inside base. Outside end I like for this kind of chart because that means those labels, in other words the numbers, are going to show up right above each of these little bars. So let's try that. And now I've got my numbers here. Remember earlier when I said that the numbers in this table were too precise, like there's way too many numbers after the decimal? This is why. Now it's showing all these numbers and it's not even readable at all. So what I want to do is select all of these numbers, and I'm just going to change them so that they round to the nearest whole number. And I'll do that by going back to my Home tab and just decreasing the decimal. Keep hitting this box until we just have a whole number here. It's less precise, but it makes it so that I can now have the data labels on this table. And readers then can know, for example, that in Potter County it's 27. They can visualize it, but they can also get that data more precisely that way too. So, how can you add data labels to a visualization? I've just showed you. When might you want to do that? There could be other instances than what I've described. In other words, when readers want precise information. I'll let you kind of think of that. And then when might you not want to add data labels to a visual? I'll let you think of a situation where that might be the case too. So these are the 3 questions you need to answer. You do not have to write a lot here. I just want you to take some time to think about these questions and then play around with the data visualizations. The key here is that when you're selected, or when you have a cell in the pivot table selected, you can go to the Pivot Table Analyze tab, Pivot Chart, and then once you have that, the Design tab will open up and you can change the chart type to anything you want and you can play around. That's what I would really encourage you to do, is to explore here. So I hope this is helpful, and I will follow up with you in class tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.